Chair.
Thank you, Ranking Member Morelli. And thank you to our witnesses for appearing here today. When I served as the Secretary of State of Florida, one of my core responsibilities was to work with local election officials to ensure voter rolls were accurate and up to date. Voter list maintenance is a critical part of ensuring election accuracy and building public confidence in our elections process. This is not and should never be a partisan issue. Maintaining accurate and reliable voter rolls is fundamental to election security and public trust. That work is not suppression. That work is not a purge. It is an essential part of sound administration and public accountability, and should be required both by clear laws and by any reasonable standard of public integrity. As members of this committee, we have a responsibility to ensure that every state is using clear, consistent standards to maintain their roles, and we should be promoting transparency, supporting data sharing tools, and removing barriers that prevent states from performing these essential duties. I was so pleased to see that President Trump's executive order on preserving and protecting the integrity of American elections supports these goals, including expanding access to tools like the SAVE database, which helps identify voters who may no longer or may not be eligible. So I thank you all for bringing with you today ideas and testimony that relate to how we can support election officials in doing that better. Mr. Reamer, I would like to return to your testimony about the NVRA and the 90-day blackout periods. I think that's an important thing for us to understand as we consider the way that law is written today and how it might be better. So you mentioned the blackout periods, and now there are different types of removals, are there not, that some of which are affected by blackout periods, some aren't. Would you please elaborate for us on what the law is now and how it could be improved?
Absolutely. So the blackout period applies to systemic list maintenance that takes place within 90 days of any federal election as it relates to voters who have moved, and some courts have interpreted it to apply to removing non-citizens and other ineligible voters as well. It does not apply to removing deceased, and it does not apply to removing some other types of ineligible voters. Individualized removals are permitted within the 90-day period, but anytime a state tries to do individualized removals, they get sued saying that it's a prohibited systemic removal process.
As a former Board of Elections officials, you helped Virginia establish data sharing agreements with neighboring states. Would you tell us how effective, were those useful? Is it something that you recommend other states deploy to help ensure their roll accuracy?
Absolutely, it's absolutely essential because the NCOA data does not have enough, it's missing information. The best way is for states to talk to each other and to share that information and to get these voters off the rolls. And I think one thing that I was emphasizing is what we really need to do is skip this confirmation process that you have to wait 2 federal general elections as much as possible, because it just doesn't work. It's too clunky.
And Mr. Adams, I'd like to return to you. One of the things you mentioned in your testimony was the third-party voter registration groups and the effect that they have on contributing in some places to inaccuracy or duplicate registrations. Would you elaborate on what those groups are, how they work, and how they affect this problem?
Right. These are the people with clipboards at community events or at the grocery store. And what we have found over and over and over again, the problems on the voter rolls are often traced back to third-party registrations, whether it's Rashawn Slade, which I would urge you to look in my written testimony in the appendix. He was getting registered to vote 6 times by third-party groups. Same with non-citizens in North Carolina. We trace those back in those reports to third-party registration groups. Look, there's a different incentive structure. They want to get as many people registered as possible, so they don't do a lot of quality control.
I'd also like for you to touch on, in your experience, some of the efforts and some of the lengths that elections officials go to in their communities to help ensure that voters are able to register and that registering to vote is an accessible and easy process for them.
Yeah, it has never been easier in the United States to register to vote than it is right now today, and it's never been easier to vote than it is today. And that's in large measure because of the diligence of a lot of election officials who pour a lot of time and money into making it easy to register and vote. That's why the registration and participation rates were so high in this last federal election.
Thank you. I now recognize the ranking member of the Elections Subcommittee, the gentlelady from Alabama, Ms. Sewell.